everyone. Welcome back again to another session of the Plato Elevate Summer Summit. My name is Balki, and I'm a director of engineering at Shogun Labs. Shogun is an e-commerce platform, and we enable merchants to create fast, beautiful sites very easily. We're a fully remote organization, globally distributed and spread across 40 countries. And I'm most excited to welcome our featured speaker today, Sameera Rao. Sameera heads up engineering for all consumer business at PayPal, which includes all the consumer-facing products, experience, and core platforms that power these products. In a career spanning over 2 decades, Sameera was the first engineer on products at Attributor. It was a startup in the Bay Area focused on the publishing industry, which was eventually acquired by Digimarc in 2012. He also played key roles as an engineer in the Web 2.0 transformation of Yahoo back in mid-2000s and at Sabre Airline Solutions before that. So without further ado, welcome, Sameera. The stage is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Balki. We appreciate it. Hey, everybody. Thank you for having me here, and looking forward to this talk here and more my journey and what I have learned over the course of the 10 years or more, 9 years here at PayPal, and of course 2 decades plus overall in the industry. Probably, the best place probably to start is just a bit of my background. The only reason why I want to share that is it all dovetails into the talk itself from my lens. I did a couple of years at GE and Bosch back in India before I moved to the US in early 2000s. And after that, my journey has been where I was part of the core framework team at Sabre Airline Solutions. And this framework team was basically the web UI framework for all the products that we built at Sabre for airlines. All the crew management and yield management for tickets and the whole 9 yards. And that's what Sabre does for the airline industry. And as a result of working on those, on the framework and integrations into the products, that led me to Yahoo back in mid 2000s. And Yahoo was, Yahoo and #1 most trafficked page in the world, all that back in 2005. And that basically, that transition was very interesting for me because that helped me learn a lot about scale and what needs to be done for scale from a tech perspective. Worked with some of the big names in the industry, Doug Crockford, Steve Souders, a whole bunch of others. Learned a lot there, which then led me to Attributor, which was in stealth mode when I joined in 2006. I was the first engineer on all things products in that sense, to build the products for the publishing industry to be able to monitor and monetize content that these publishers would publish. And I joke that I did 4 startups in the 6 years that I was there because we ended up pivoting every couple of years on an average to find the right product market fit. And in 2011 or so, we kind of found that with books, which is how we eventually got acquired by Digimarc. And from then on, a lot of what I'm going to focus on here in the next 30 minutes or so is going to be the tech transformation journey here at PayPal in my current, or in these 9 years leading up to my current role as well. And, one of the things that I was very interested in coming out of the startup was, okay, how do I bring that startup DNA, if you will, into PayPal? And what would, in being able to contribute towards that transformation journey? Because PayPal in the early 2010s started to focus on transformation. And, as we all know, started by Elon Musk and team in the late 90s, and part of eBay for a good chunk of the last 2 decades. PayPal definitely started that journey in 2011, I would say, to say, hey, you know what, it is time for us to move away from the 90s experiences and monolithic tech stack across the board. And how do we make sure that there is a lot of all the goodness that the new tech stack and micro apps, microservices bring to the table. And probably, Cappy, if you want to go to the next one. So I will go through the 4 transformation journeys that I've been part of at PayPal. And it is, as we all know, it is always an ongoing journey. But these 4 are very significant because this meant changing the entire underbelly of what PayPal is as a ship. You know, web, mobile, our APIs, and killing legacy, which is kind of nuanced, and I'll get to that in a bit. But you know, when I joined and I wanted to come in and see how I can contribute towards that transformation, and the first one that we took on was the web transformation. And you know, the next slide, we started that journey saying, okay, you know, and probably if you want to go to the next one, Cappy, and then we can come back to this, and I want to just relate to that. So, you know, when we started this out in 2012, the web experience was a monolith, which meant content that we had to change on a page would take us probably 6 weeks of build. And that was because it was this monolithic tech stack where entire companies' web experience would go out as one big build. So there was no, in some sense, decentralized and micro apps approach where we can push our own code and be able to try it out quickly, right? So the whole intent was, okay, how do we create a tech stack that's basically built for learning? And how do we used to say, how do we set the UI bits free, you know? And the thing that we started out was, okay, let's double click on Node and what that means, and is Node a tech stack that we can adopt at PayPal? And naturally, you know, there is number one resistance because, oh wow, okay, Node.js, and that's a little bit of a stretch for a company like PayPal, not because PayPal couldn't do it, but because it's fintech, and what does security look like for Node.js, and would Node.js scale for the kind of scale that we were already at early 2010s, you know? And those are all very valid considerations and concerns, and we had to work through that. And the background was, the legacy was C++, and there was a sprinkling of Spring J2E framework in the house as well. And there was a lot of proprietary software. And again, a lot of that, as we started on Peel, we realized there was not a whole lot of need for proprietary software as much as just making sure that the open source stack worked well, and for the security and scale considerations predominantly, right? And of course, it had to scale for the billions of hits that we get every day on a number of our products, experiences, and services. And of course, as we all know, the key tenet is always focused on how do we change the tires when it is going 100 miles per hour, because the business can't stop. At the same time, we need to transform and evolve. And of course, there is always a focus on, okay, what is the return on investment from a business perspective? So if we go back to the previous one, for me, the tenet always came down to, and in the 9 years or so here in different transformation journeys, it has always come down for me to these three key P's, as I have it internalized in my mind. Always starts with people. It's the platform and products that we focus on, and it's the pennies that we need to focus on as well. And this construct has helped me immensely in compartmentalizing things, because as we say, it's different strokes for different folks in terms of what is really important for the different constituents of the piece, if you will. So if you go to the next one, Cape. So for example, on mobile, as we got into the mobile transformation journey, it was a very similar paradigm playing out. And mobile, let me just take an example of one of the apps at PayPal, where the app is a combination of 20 plus development teams and a plethora of products and experiences, and 200 at that time 200 plus developers, which has grown to 300 and even 400 plus now, across 7 different time zones with development centers across the globe, and then making it all come together and go to the app stores as our iOS and Android apps. The thing was, as it evolved, and naturally so, it was a monolithic tech stack, right? And what did that look like? It was all one single repository and one trunk, if you will, from where code would go to CI build, and CI build was just this one pipeline, right? As a result, if there were 100 PRs coming in on a given day and one of them was not good, guess what? The entire pipeline is hosed and everyone would just get blocked. So as a result, it was a very unpredictable 6 weeks app rollout cycle, because it's just something would get stuck and everyone would be stuck and the whole regression wouldn't run, and you get the drill. And now, coming from the Node.js journey, and I'll go back and forth a little bit, because a lot of what I want to highlight is the patterns, right? Because we take on these different channels and the different transformation journeys, but it all comes down to the same playbook, if you will. And going back a little bit to the Node.js journey, the biggest one that I had to figure out as we go into that story a little bit is it was a very matrix organization, and and it continues to be, and as is any large company. And there was a natural resistance by the engineering managers of each of the products, saying, "Oh, Node.js, and I don't know, I'm not sure about this. How do we go about this?" So one of the first things we did was we introduced a new, at that point at least, new paradigm of lean UX. The whole idea being, how can we quickly iterate on our experiences, get in front of our customers on a really weekly basis, get the feedback for the experience, and then go ahead and productionalize that. And we decided, okay, Node.js is perfectly suited for this, where we iterate quickly, get in front of our customers, and in a very lab environment. And it did a few things, right? One was, obviously, we got great input from our customers. The most important thing from a technology perspective was it got us the opportunity to pressure test Node for some scale and integrate that with the existing PayPal tech stacks and the services. The other thing it also did was it, in some sense, created a forcing function for the backend, the service layer, to be microservices. Because in some sense, we said, hey, you know what, this is Node, and it requires a service, an API that pumps in the data for the routes to go and fetch the data and the middle tier to work. And what I want to highlight there is the aspect of starting small and setting ourselves up for iterations and learning. And of course, the keen focus there was measurement as well. And everything, we measured everything, right? How Node was doing in being able to handle how many requests can it handle in a second? How many cores of CPU does it need to be able to do this? How quickly can we scale as the traffic scales, etc. And a similar theme played out when we did the mobile transformation journey, because it was the same thing. It was about bringing the people on board on, okay, it is okay to federate this and create SDKs instead of it being a monolithic stack. Sure, it has to go out as a binary finally to the app stores, but that does not mean that it has to be built that way. It has to, the SDLC has to play out that way, right? So we started small. We took one particular thing, wallet, as the first one that we took on, and we refactored the code to be a SDK and say, okay, how would that work? So we created a separate CI pipeline for the wallet SDK to play out, and had a way for this SDK to get into the app after it went through testing and went through automated tests as its own independent CI pipeline, which then gets merged to the big one, and then so forth. And again, the same things play out there. You know, it's the people and making sure that through these incremental steps, we get people on this journey together, and then focus very, very, very hard on the platform aspects and engineering, because you know, the scale, the response times, what does it mean for cold start time, what does it mean for the app size, and keeping an eye out on all these and a lot more from a measurement perspective, and focusing on, of course, the cost, because at the end of the day, this is a business case that we make, saying this is going to be much better, and being able to articulate that crisply. The next one, and Gabby, I just want to quickly check on the time. It says 12 minutes for me. Does that include Q&A, or is that outside of that? Okay, all right. And the third one here in this journey has been the BLIs, so basically linked libraries, and this goes back to the bowels of how PayPal used to be in terms of the C++ code base and all the linking and the whole 9 yards. And this, as you can imagine, was a beast to go after, because this, and naturally, you know, in any tech stack, the UI and then the services and basically the server side, if you will, which spit out JSON for it to be consumed on different channels. And then there is the backend, which is a layer or two deeper, closer to the database. And this, as you can, if you can imagine a monolithic tech stack where everything is going into this across everything PayPal at that scale, teasing this out was a very, very interesting journey, because it is hundreds of teams, I mean, literally thousands of developers across the board. And as is very, as it plays out in any of these legacy tech stacks, people would have moved on. The folks who did this either aren't there in the company anymore, or they would have moved on to another team where there is no bandwidth for them to even answer any questions, or consciously they don't want to, because I mean, they've done this for, I don't know, 10 years and they don't want to do this anymore, you know? And figuring this out is an interesting thing, because this gets me to that last point there on pennies, which is investing into something like this, and everything that you just saw, and particularly this, would mean something's got to give in the current product roadmap. So how much do we want to invest in something that we want to kill legacy on, and what is the ROI there? Versus, hey, okay, here's an opportunity where there is probably a $100 million business. And how do you make a prioritization call on something like that? One of the things that it has been interesting, that has been very effective for us, is the aspect of, one of the things that we did early on, and this comes to my consumer part of the journey, because I spent for the first 4 years at PayPal on the merchant side of our network, and the next 4 as it has been playing out on the consumer side. And just a little bit of 30 seconds on PayPal itself. PayPal works because it's a two-sided network, right? There is merchants on one side, 30+ million of them who accept PayPal. And then there are consumers.
Sure. Tell me what's on your mind.
All right, let me pull this out for a second. And then there are consumers, 400 million consumers and customers who use PayPal, and it's a two-sided network. Merchants come to us because there is 400 million pairs of eyes on their websites and apps as a result. And consumers come because 330 million plus merchants accept PayPal. And then obviously P2P and a lot of the consumer-facing products, crypto and others that we have launched last year, and QR, etc. That gives you a flavor for the kind of complexity that we deal with. And on this particular one, to figure out, okay, how do we do this? One of the things that has been very key, which has been a pattern in all of these that we just saw, has been creating a separate track, if you will, for these transformation journeys. And in a number of these cases, I've had some vendors help us out in being able to jump in and create capacity, while our subject matter experts continue to focus on the forward-facing product roadmaps, and helping by being the tech leads, if you will, in not only onboarding and ramping these vendors up, but also working with them very closely in this journey of getting rid of tech debt and killing legacy. That's just been phenomenal, because we've been able to keep a close eye out on cost and have these two run in parallel, so that we don't jeopardize one for the other. And then a lot of interesting learnings and bruises along the journey, and probably a couple I'll share. One of the ones that we took on our web transformation journey was where we took on both the tech stack migration and the experience migration at the same time. One of the biggest mistakes we did, right? Because here's what happened. We did the tech migration, which was awesome. And we're like, oh, right, this is cool. And then we did the experience migration at the same time. And guess what? It just didn't convert. So the conversion was worse than what we had, which was uncontrolled. So we had to iterate on the experience quite a bit before we could get to a point where we were net positive from a BIPS perspective on conversion. And all this while, we just could not kill legacy, because the tech stack was tightly coupled with the experience. It's and a number of other learnings, but happy to get into any of those questions. But I mean, if you want to summarize over the next couple of slides, Cappy, I have a couple of slides that summarize all of this. My learnings and what has been effective, just to call some of these out. the first and foremost is crisp articulation of why we need something and what the benefits are, and being able to articulate that for the different constituents of the company, right? It's the leadership, it's the middle management and the managers who really go after this, and of course, developers, most importantly, on why we are doing this and what the advantage is. And of course, product design and all the partners. And champions, absolutely essential, who can sponsor it. Training, very, very key. And the most important thing being setting ourselves up for learning, as I covered earlier. And of course, keeping it nimble and all the learning, and how do we keep it very in a decentralized world? The governance is a very key aspect to keep in mind, because all of these will get decentralized, and guess what? People started to try out React and Angular and other technologies, and like, oh wow, okay, we are opening up a bit of a Pandora's box here as a result of newfound freedom for the developers. And how do you kind of have a bit of a governance going? Was a very interesting learning experience to go through as well. Probably going to the next one from a more developer-focused lens. I mean, this has been my learning as a developer, and as I've grown through the ladder to have a perspective on this. A few things that has helped me over the years, and that's helped us overall as part of this journey. Nothing beats focusing on the customer. In all of these, the key driver for us has been, what does it mean for the customer, and articulating that, and it starts and ends there, right? And absolutely essential. The business aspects is very key too. For example, what is the business value that something drives as a result of doing it is a very key thing. And while all this tech transformation has been playing out, I don't know how many org changes I've been part of. It's part of the game, and I over the years I've realized it's 18-month shelf life for any org. It keeps changing, especially in big companies, and the show must go on while all these tactical changes are playing out. And having that perspective is very important. And some of the things that have been very interesting, that I don't know how many times we have stumbled on this, is instrumentation. We somehow do all these fancy things, and instrumentation is lacking. As a result, we just cannot measure what's doing well and what's not. And focusing on that is key. Accessibility, another big one. Accessibility is being inclusive. It's not a option. It's not an afterthought. Being accessible is being inclusive in this world, and a very key thing to fold in as part of the life cycle, and absolutely should not be an afterthought. And the pixel perfection is the other one I have realized over time, because again, we look at the macro picture, the functionality, and especially when you take on the transformation journeys, which are years sometimes, it's easy to say, hey, you know what, the bigger picture, it's functional, it works well. But the key thing is those pixels and creating those magic moments for the customers. And how do we do that while focusing on these big journeys is a very key aspect as well. And of course, more internally for all of us, up-leveling and fighting that tendency to get comfortable and the inertia, right? How do we continue to be the change agents every single day without getting institutionalized has been a very key experience as well. All right, I know I spoke a lot, but definitely want to pause here for any questions and help answer.
Sameera, thank you so much. So to impress you, I found a statistic about PayPal. 25% of all online transactions go through PayPal. So that's pretty huge. So I can only imagine the engineering scale challenges you might face over there. So thank you again for sharing your perspective and how you went through the journey. I'm not sure. I think we may not have a lot of time. Maybe we'll have time for one question. Cappy, let us know if we can continue. Okay, so we'll do one question from Emma Garofalo. What are some things to prepare for as a startup that intend to scale significantly? And what is the correct type of foundation to set?
Yep, a great question. What I would say is definitely put all the foundations in place to learn. That's the most important thing, because scale will come in terms of figuring it out in AWS and GCP, or the more technology and all that can be figured out. The most important thing to, I think, keep in mind is how do we scale the measurement? How do we scale for learning? Are we nimble enough to be able to learn and quickly adapt? Is probably the biggest one I would say to keep in mind for scale, because the other ones are after that more tactical.
Got it. I got green signal to go a few minutes over, Sameera. I hope it's okay with you. So sure. We'll go another 4 minutes and try to cover the remaining questions. So next question I see up here is from John Park. How do you balance long-term between engineering excellence work in the face of pressure to deliver from the business stakeholder side? That's a reality for all of us engineering leaders every single day.
It's a great question, and it's there is no one answer, and there is no one silver bullet to do this. But it's very important to understand the nuances and do this with those nuances. For example, in my portfolio, which spans the length and breadth of the consumer offerings, every portfolio is different. And every portfolio brings with its own set of challenges and its own people. Again, those 3 Ps that I talked about, people, platform, and pennies, they play out differently in each of these portfolios, right? Some people are very there in terms of this journey saying, yeah, we absolutely need to invest in this. And some people are with all the right intent saying, you know what, I want to double down and my KPI is to go after this business value. And that's what I'm going to drive. So it's very important to have that nuanced view and make sure that from an engineering perspective, especially from a leadership perspective, you are the champion for this. You are the face of this. You are the champion of this. So it needs to play out that way, where it needs to be that objective, very open conversation on why we need to invest in this, which is where my earlier point on articulation becomes very key. And articulating it to business metrics is very key as well, because it's just not enough to say, hey, you know what, it's going to be 1904 or 5 nines, and it will be X, Y, Z, and it'll scale this way, because that still will not be enough in a number of cases. It needs to be where, hey, you know what, this will save these many sprints in dev time, and as a result, we'll spend $100 million over a 3-year time frame. Or it will help us scale to UK and France and Germany, and as a result, this is the incremental $500 million of revenue we're going to be able to generate as a result. Those are very key as you go along on that journey.
Awesome. The next question is from Cyprian, and I relate to this as well. We're a scaling company. So how do you balance having enough rules so there's no chaos, but keep the environment open enough to foster innovation, right? So again, another challenge engineering leaders face.
Absolutely. And a couple of key keywords that I'll call out here in my experience. It's very important to empower and have the command at the same time, because both of them have to be there and both of them have to play out really well for that to work well. Because for example, if it's a P2P or a crypto or any other portfolios, for example, in my world, absolutely those teams need to be innovating and pushing the envelope. But at the same time, it needs to be in a overall strategic architecture. And it needs to be overall having some solid governance, so that we are not getting into a, hey, you know what, this tech stack is in, or this product is in this tech stack, and something else is in some other tech stack. and there is no way to reconcile. And the entropy kicks in so quickly unless there is solid governance on a number of these things. So it's very important. Those three things are very key: empowerment, governance, and having the command, where as an engineering leader, you're able to connect the dots across these different things and looking at it from a higher plane and saying, okay, that is okay, but this is not, and being able to navigate that way.
Awesome. Thank you, Sameera. Maybe we'll do one last question, and then folks can move on to other things. If you, from Raghuji, if you have to go back and rebuild a product like PayPal, what would be your advice and thoughts? You've been there long enough, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
It's a great question, and probably we'll need a few days to answer that. But let me take it. Probably a few things stand out. I think if PayPal can, I guess, if we can roll back 10 years. Obviously all the choices that were made were right for that time, and then hindsight is always 2020. But a few things I'll call out are, I would definitely set things up for learning, as I mentioned earlier. What can be the stack that can enable learning? Because monolithic tech stacks do not let you iterate and learn quickly from a customer perspective, right? The second thing is cloud. For all the right reasons, it was a very on-prem play, and especially fintech. And obviously, the scale and being able to be there in all geographies all at the same time, obviously, is hindered as a result of on-prem data centers. And especially now where a lot of the countries have the regulations of data being on the country's soil, you can imagine the kind of heavy lift it is to have an on-prem data center, right? And the cloud migration is a huge lift for a company like PayPal. I would say those would be the top two. There's so much more I can talk about, but probably I will pause there.
Thank you so much, Sameera.